What did you think, Troy?
Of Matrix?
Yes.
I let it wash all over me, and it was glorious.
Okay.
It was far better. Look, I was not anticipating something. I like all the movies.
Yeah.
All right. I think 2 and 3 are. You shut the hell up.
Wow.
I think the 2 and 3. My Mac just restarted. I think that 2 and 3, once you put them into the context of a lot of what was happening, and if you look at them as just straight movies, yeah. If you want to just look at Matrix Reloaded, and Matrix Reloaded.
The new one's Revolution.
Revolution is the last one, then Resurrection is the last. I got confused. I think I could look to see how you could be like, they kind of didn't do as well as I wanted them to between 2 and 3. However, if you put them in the context of what was happening when they were filming them, the Wachowskis are amazing. They were so far ahead of their time.
Oh yeah.
What's interesting is that one of the Wachowskis is missing from this latest installment. It's just Lana Wachowski, correct?
Yep.
So I'm not sure why the other Wachowski decided she didn't want to be a part of this.
There's a reason for that.
Is there? Because I didn't know.
Yeah, I looked it up because I was curious.
There's no reason. It happened. They're just missed phone calls.
Yeah, just...
You guys are making that?
Passing of the night.
I didn't know you were doing that.
No, it was that... it was very linked to them emotionally with, I believe, their parents dying. And Lana expressed that she felt like it would be good for her to make something that has a theme of love, I guess is what I would say.
Did their parents die back during the time of the old films? Like,
no,
I think they would have died
it was
subsequently.
Recently.
Like afterwards.
And the other Wachowski had said that she basically didn't want to. She wasn't in the space where she wanted to revisit something. Like, it was just that this is how they, as creatives, took.
I understand that. And by the way,
differently.
it's a simple Google thing. I just cannot remember. I keep. It's like I feel bad for not being able to remember. I just remember Lana Wachowski because I just saw it on screen. So please forgive me for not being able to remember her sister's name.
I'm also forgetting her sister's name, unfortunately.
I never knew
Lily.
their names
Lily.
at any point because it was always just
The
the
Wachowskis.
Wachowskis. Yeah.
So it's Lana and Lily.
Lana and Lily, thank you. So Lily, apologies for not remembering your name.
Known listener of the show. So
Huge fan.
But they put the phone down. It was like, we were about to call.
That said, after this movie, and I also recently saw Speed Racer, the Wachowskis have shot so high up on my list of creatives that I would love to sit down and talk to. Just to be like,
Dude.
What went into making this? How do you storyboard Speed Racer? And like, how do you work on big budget properties and just clearly get to do whatever you want? Like, I feel like the way they work is so interesting.
Well, and especially going back, and this is a wonderful opportunity. It's a wonderful reminder. There are people that were not really able to live or really aware of this franchise. We were so spoiled in the early 2000s because we had, kicking off in '99, we had Matrix, and then we had Lord of the Rings, we had Harry Potter. Now it's a little bit. There was a time before the MCU. There was a time before the DCU. There was a time before all of these huge mega franchises where people just kind of expected something of it to be on a big screen.
X-Men, the first Bryan Singer X-Men came out in 2000
2003?
also.
No, was it 2000? 2000, yeah.
And it was like novel. It was like a big budget superhero movie?
Right. Because before then, you had, Tim Burton had his run. Joel Schumacher had come in and done his...
Destroyed it all.
Destroyed everything. But yeah, it's superhero movies and big franchises. And what's so funny is if you haven't watched Equilibrium, which Matrix far outshadowed, but Equilibrium was it's kind of the same premise, a little bit more leaned into more of like a Huxleyan, a dystopian future kind of thing. It's you would dig it as well, and the IP in some ways is very cool. The world in the Matrix is far better, but the IP and the idea behind Equilibrium is really cool. You should check it out. But I loved the Animatrix. The Animatrix held after I saw Matrix and before 2 came out. My next door neighbor at this apartment that I lived in was like, "Have you seen the Animatrix?" I said, "No." He goes, "Come over right now. You got to watch this. It reframes everything." And so watching all of those things, there's this beautiful anthology of different creators. The guy who did Aeon Flux did one for the thing. It went so much more into backstory and world building and gave you more context that I went into 2 going, oh, plus there were 2 people that died during the filming of Matrix Reloaded and one in between Revolution. The original actress who played the Oracle,
I didn't know that.
she died. So all of a sudden, you have this pinnacle character that you have to go, we have to recast or we have to change our story. And they decided to lean into the fact that it was different. Instead of doing 2 Darrens and never mentioning it at all, they leaned into the notion. And also the original...
It's the perfect IP to be able to pull that off. They certainly got lucky to, like, it's very believable under the story framework of The Matrix that someone would change appearance.
I think from the outside looking in, sure. But I think the Wachowskis, as you said, Alanah, being able to go, how do we fix this, takes such an incredible level of skillful narrative and storytelling to be able to go. And even still people were like, nah, that was stupid. I'm like, do you know what they were fixing? Like they had to completely change the character. It totally altered and led the charge. It became such a cornerstone of the story. And in Animatrix, they go into even more of it. And there's stuff that's in the game that talks about it as well. And the beauty is there. Get ready, kids. This is what we're in for today. You asked for this. There's so much of the story that is told, and what I love is that they.
This is where Ron Howard inserts. No one asked for this.
No one. They didn't. The fact that they were already, the Wachowskis were already showing it's not about, like, we can have an entire podcast talking about the different characters and the side characters of Ghost, APOC, and everybody else, but especially of Watts and how they were a binary character, a non-binary character. Or Switch, sorry. Was it Switch? Yeah, Switch.
Sure. This is all you.
So I don't have my my Bible up right now. Matrix stuff,
notes.
I'm going off of memory. But if you go and play the game, and people have heard me talk about this before too, that was such a beautiful thing because it wasn't like, oh, we should also probably do a video game to tie this in and find another cash grab and revenue stream for this. Here was a completely different way for us to tell a totally different story that sits parallel to this one. And
I believe Lana Wachowski also worked on the Unreal demo, the Matrix
I'm not
demo.
Surprised.
And I think that's
Not
also really
surprised.
cool. You're right that I do not feel like these two are people who care about cash grabs. The closest to that impression that I would get would be Jupiter Ascending, which very much feels like Twilight. It is the 3 Twilight movies put into one movie in a way that's like, it's so similar that it feels like you were trying to do this. And I am one of the people who kind of enjoyed Jupiter Ascending once I accepted that it was super silly.
it is supercilious.
Nice.
The thing that, I mean, they intentionally, it's not that they took stuff that they cut out of the movie and put it into the game. They shot stuff specifically for the game so that it would look the exact same. And that to me is what I want to do. I want to show that you can have something that has like Last of Us Part 2 graphics that is also on Netflix and is also in a game and tell the story in 2 different ways. Using the same, not like, here's a film adaptation of a game. It's like, no, use the same exact technology. And I think the Unreal 5 demo for Matrix showed you can do it. Everybody was like, damn, that looks real. So I think that we're getting there. But being able to put all of that into context and understanding that the original choice for Captain Niobe was actually going to be Aaliyah, and she tragically died in between filming. And so they had to recast, and they got Jada Pinkett Smith in there. There was just so many obstacles that they overcame, and I really applaud them as filmmakers for being able to, as Ryan Holiday puts in his book, the obstacle is the way. That became, there's like, oh, here's an opportunity for us to tell the story in a different way, and they did it. So going into this new movie, I was ready for anything. And from the very beginning, I was just laughing, going, absolutely, why not? Yes. And they did a great job of making me question everything. They did a great job of presenting it in such a way that the story that they were telling, I was 100% into. I want to applaud Keanu Reeves because this doesn't say anything, but just the first coffee shop scene, he was lights out. He was lights out. His just subtlety and response was so endearing.
I thought he was great, yeah.
Everybody was expecting him to be John Wick, but just playing Neo, and it was the total opposite. There was no badass about him.
Yeah.
It was so good. The fight scenes were incredible. I would rate it thus. I would go 1, 4, 2, 3.
Wow.
Without including,
so
three,
I have
three is not
to
good.
fundamentally disagree with you on the fight scenes. I think the choreography in this movie was the thing that I was disappointed by.
Okay, why?
Feels like a lot of really fast cuts and not a lot of like very cool action. I felt like the fighting almost felt like it was made by somebody else. I
definitely think it was probably a different fight choreographer, because the original fight choreographer was Master Ping, I believe, is who it was. Yeah.
And they just seemed to cut around it. It's like it wasn't a spectacle. It was just there. I found it like very underwhelming. And at first, the premise at first, which we will try not to spoil this. At first, I was like annoyed by it because there was all this terminology that I was like, these people don't speak like that. This is infuriating to listen to. But then, as it delves into what's actually happening and I was understanding why they did that, I actually thought that was brilliant and I was very entertained by it. And I think that there are like some things that I don't love about it. I understand criticisms that it's interesting you don't have Troy, because I didn't have them as someone who's not like lifelong Matrix fan, that the events of this film undo previous films in a way that people didn't like. But for me, it was mostly like, as soon as I just was like, I'm here for whatever this lore is, I got super into it. I was like, oh, this means this and this means that. No, that happened because of this. And I just like got very, very into it while thinking.
I don't want to get too far down that rabbit hole, but I am curious as to what events it undoes, because to me, every time I was like, yeah, but you forgot about this.
They went,
sacrifice. No.
People
but
feel
it worked.
It undid the sacrifice, made it meaningless.
No, this is the beauty of it. This is how I can look at it and go, people are like, they're trying to prop him up as a messianic character. I was like, yeah, absolutely. They're using that, which, by the way, Jesus is not the only one. There's multiple iterations of... That's
a criticism levied at this film?
Yeah.
I mean, that was the third film. Like, it wasn't even subtle. How could you criticize that about this without also criticizing the third for the same reason?
Without giving away too much, it basically, obviously we have a fourth movie, which means it didn't bring about the end of the war, right? So there's now, this is still continuing. So the thing that I loved about that is, if you want to lean into the messianic role of that and using the traditional form of Jesus did the same thing. He was supposed to save the world on the cross. That was the whole thing. And here we are 2,000 years later, and we fight more.
Still sinning.
Till sinning.
Till sinning.
We need to go back to wine, Troy. So I it's an interesting criticism. I look at it as far as narratively. Look, I mean, once you flip
Are you using the Elgato?
I am. Then the metal button.
Mine also came off.
Yeah, so. It's a fun thing to play with.
It is a fun thing to play with.
Once you flip a Ducati in midair and have Trinity, do the splits in a bad way and beat guys up with her helmet and then bash out of the window in 120 frames and have bullets go through you and all that stuff, I didn't need to see that anymore. What I wanted to see was not better storytelling, but more rich storytelling. I
think the relationships are very rich.
Yeah.
And I really liked the lore. Look, I feel like there are things about this movie that I thought were sort of bad, but I didn't care. And it was very interesting that, Austin, I think that I was benefited by going in the same expectations that you have. My Twitter timeline was full of people who I usually agree with saying it was the worst movie that they'd ever seen. And I was like, okay.
Come on.
Twitter, I know that
isn't.
it makes us exaggerate our opinions on things because that's the best way to get engagement. But I was seeing
my eyes were bleeding as I stood in line.
I was seeing people be like,
poster.
if you like this movie, you have terrible taste and you're irredeemable, like really intense. And so I was like, this is going to be terrible. And so I went in and I was like,
you deserve death.
Kind of. So I was pleasantly surprised by being into it. It was like, I wouldn't say that I felt like it was a great film. However, I really enjoyed it. So isn't that it serving its purpose? And again, it made me go, damn, the Wachowskis.
Yeah.
Was a very big fan of how they explored relationships more than anything, I think.
It's worth remembering that people said the same thing about the second and third films, too. They were seemingly, despite being successful films, they were seemingly universally hated. And The Matrix is the classic go-to when people want to say, there was no need for a sequel. The first one is perfect. They sullied it, I remember at the time kind of feeling a bit neutral, like back in 2003 or whenever they came out, and thinking, oh, there's plenty that I like about these films. There was a lot I liked about the films, but I also remember thinking, I wouldn't have hated if all we had was the first one. It's just so perfect. But I remember maybe 10 years afterwards, so give or take 10 years ago, I went and did like a triple screening of the 3 films. And I remember thinking, relative to the run-of-the-mill summer like Transformer movie, these are way, way more ambitious films than we're used to for a summer blockbuster. And
for sure.
History had made that feel all the more striking when I watched, the so-called bad ones of Reloaded and Revolutions. I was like, these films are imperfect and their story logic seems to me to be flawed, but they are aspiring to something that most movies don't even aspire to. I would rather watch a movie that doesn't quite stick the landing, but tries to get another flip in the jump.
I mean, that's the way I felt about Spider-Man. Was that I was like, there are some logic leaps here that I initially found very annoying. And I was like, why would they do this? This doesn't make any sense. I don't buy that he would do this. This is such a dumb risk. I don't buy any of it. And then I was like, Alanah, it's a Spider-Man movie. It's a blockbuster. Enjoy it for what it is. And then I was like, okay, this is great. It's funny and it's
absolutely
it's warm. You don't have to pick apart the logic. And I was like, just let it stop. And then I was fine. At first,
I agree, but I also don't feel. I just feel it's incomplete to go. They just didn't do some of the things they wanted to do. Did you see all of it? Because I really do feel, and this is the thing that I almost applaud the Wachowskis for the most. They presented their story in 5 parts, now 6. And if you only saw 3 and you judged them, they're like, fine. That's some fucking strength. That is like some resilience and some spine of a filmmaker to go, they may never know, but we did what we wanted to do. And that started from frame 1. Like the first thing they shot was the opening of the movie. And it's the first thing they storyboarded. And it was, if you see the boards for it, they're like, we want a comic book feel. We want this to be like the comic books that we read. They framed it as such. They blocked it as such. They shot it as such. And so they knew going in where they wanted this to go. I don't think that they went in knowing we're going to do 5, 6 parts. They were going to do 1. And then it was successful enough for them to be able to go, now where do we take it? And that's when everything fell apart. But it's not that it didn't fall apart on their side. I don't feel. And I think that if you watched all of it, you'd be like, oh shit, all right. Because one of the best things about it, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen the Animatrix or not, is watching the first 3 are really the most important. The Final Flight of the Osiris and then the 2 history ones, where you realize we're the bad guys. We're on the wrong side of this. And that to me just shines or just casts a shadow over everything that makes everything else make sense. I fucking love these movies. I left the theaters, the first movie that I've seen in the theater since COVID. And
wow.
I came home and I was like, I want to watch this on HBO. And Pam was like, no, we're going to watch something else. I was like, okay.
I'm reading over some of the... Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to throw in some trivia about the new one that is interesting. The original has one of the standout scores, I would argue, in cinema. It is one of the most memorable and strikingly original scores of all time. I mean, the whole... but to me, it all boils down to the trumpets doing the... Yeah. Can't really effectively do that on piano.
I love that you tried. You went for
crescendos, Yeah, such a great gesture. So elegantly simple. Don Davis, who was largely unknown until doing The Matrix, and just completely crushed it, and then wrote really, really, really great scores for the second and third ones as well, arguably building on it in a way that was even better. But noteworthily, didn't particularly get along with the Wachowskis, and they never worked with him again. Like Speed Racer is Giacchino, Jupiter Ascending was Giacchino, and for this one, they I guess Lana hired a composer named Johnny Klimek, who is well known as a co-composer on a lot of films with a guy named Reinhold Heil, and they did the movies of a director named Tom Tykwer, like Run Lola Run and Perfume and Cloud Atlas, which the Wachowskis, of course, were involved in. But what's interesting is Tom Tykwer is the director, but they also, the three of them, had like a band together, and so you would see like on a movie like Perfume, Tom Tykwer, the director, is credited as one of the composers. And so what was especially interesting to me was that on the new Matrix Resurrection, Tom Tykwer, while in no way related as a director, is one of the composers of the new film. So this is a person who has directed major films, but is now sitting purely in the composer chair.
That's cool.
Interesting.
On the new Matrix, and along with Johnny Klimek. But curiously, I don't think Reinhold Heil. I don't know why that is. So two of the three on this one. And I found that to be, I was like, I don't know. The only time I can think of ever hearing of that happen was this one time when, Clint Eastwood typically, at least before, would score his own films as well that he would direct. And there's only one instance of him scoring a film that he didn't direct, which was this movie called Grace is Gone with John Cusack from about 20 years ago. No, not quite. More like 15 years ago, which was, it made headlines because they fired another composer and Clint Eastwood replaced him.
Whoa.
It was like, what is going on? And there's a whole story there. I don't want to derail this off Matrix, but anyway, I thought it was interesting. I thought I misread it at first when I first looked up the Matrix, however many months ago, to see what they ended up doing in the end for music. And I saw Tom Tykwer. I was like, interesting. The director, who's like a noteworthy director. Perfume, I think, is a freaking awesome movie. Anyway, I haven't seen the film. I intentionally didn't go listen to the score yet. So this is purely trivia of credits. I can't speak to the work.
Feel like the score is good, but I don't remember, which is not necessarily.
It's probably, that's always the age-old debate. Is the best score the one that you don't notice because you're so immersed, or is the best score the one that you're humming on the drive home from the theater, a la Star Wars? They're both right.
Yeah.
There's so much about, like, it wasn't just, for me, it wasn't just the score, but it was also Rob Zombie and how going into the first the very beginning, the first club scene, that just fucking four on the floor white zombie. And the
is it the Chemical Brothers during the hotel lobby scene? You know what was so cool is in the original DVD of The Matrix had there was the director's commentary audio channel, but then there was also a music commentary audio channel that isolated the score, so it removed all the sound effects and dialogue, and so all the score cues were isolated to picture on their own, and in between those, Don Davis would talk about like this cue that's coming up, you're going to hear it starts with the trumpets and a lot of neat give, and as 17-year-old me, that was like ungodly.
Quit watching porn, Austin.
I know, for real. It was such an education to get that deep dive into a single work, and such a noteworthy work.
There's also, one of my favorite, going out of that Dragula, they do something that's so subtle where they pulse the sound of the alarm in early, and so that it gets louder and louder and louder, and then isolates so that you realize it's the alarm waking him up. It's just, to me, that the thoughtfulness of how these two worlds are intertwined.
Yeah, I agree. I like that a lot.
There was just so much. But I do want to give major props, like new characters that came in. Whoever played Bugs, who was that?
She's brilliant.
I thought
she was fantastic. I was like, I'm going to follow Jessica Henwick. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm going to follow her career. She is amazing.
Yeah, she was incredible. She was super captivating to watch. She held her own. Carrie-Anne Moss she was incredible. I loved it.
I didn't realize Neil Patrick Harris was in the movie.
Oh yeah,
Neil Patrick Harris was all up in the movie.
I had no idea.
The guy who's in Mindhunter, I don't remember his name. He's also
that's
brilliant.
where I know him from.
Yeah, and then Yaya, who is in The Watchmen, the HBO series.
Yeah.
they were all really, really good. I unfortunately
Does Neil Patrick Harris have a scene where he holds his hand on Neo's chest and goes, "He's afraid"?
He does not.
Because that's what I want.
He's good though. I don't spend as much time reading angry criticism of things anymore, so I don't feel like I can advocate for that group of people for what they were saying accurately, which feels like it's better for my mental health. But I did try to look over some like Metacritic commentary, and it is generally like it does have a 68%, which is 68% positive. It's not great, but like one of the most negative ones says a waste of time and money for fans of the series. It's a betrayal that deserves to be ignored and forgotten as soon as possible. The rehash story is convoluted, which I don't agree with. I think it's quite simple. Existing under the guise that if you can't follow along, it's because you aren't smart enough to understand. Well, I didn't read that part before I said the first part. And then mildly original but barely inspiring, the reboot proves that cover movies and unnecessary franchise reboots are generally a bad idea. And I don't know, I feel like I'm looking at it as, again, I didn't love it, but I feel like I'm looking at it as a love story. And I feel 100%. Like it executes that very well.
It's almost to the point of being ham-fisted in some ways. You know what I mean? It's like, what was that? A professor from UCLA Film School? Who was that?
It's just 3 different reviewers on Metacritic.
69 from Des Moines. Got it. I look.
Do you remember the Trinity Neo love theme? It's very nice. Don Davis. Oh shit! Just nearly knocked
punch your microphone about it.
I know. Seriously.
You're next, Alanah.
John
I feel
Davis,
like that's the ghost of jet lag Mike fucking with us, by the way.
Not a big melody score, but it has the very nice, I don't know if that's in that score at all, but it's prominently featured in the third movie.
I think so.
As like their theme, and I remember that being a surprise because it's really prominent towards the end of Revolutions. And I remember at some point going back to the first one and realizing, holy shit, that was actually like given a tiny little appearance in the first film. I always love those little structural moments, like in Lord of the Rings, which is the theme for like Minas Tirith and the people of Gondor. That actually appears during one scene of Fellowship. It's all over. It's in like every freaking queue. He beats it to death in Return of the King. And I remember being blown away when I realized that he actually had worked that out in advance.
Where is it?
In Fellowship? Hold on. Here's a question though. Do you feel that is a composer thinking down the line? So I know where these stories are going. Therefore, I'm going to hold on to this and set up this. Or the director perhaps doing this. I'm going to set up this cue, this music cue, to be the theme. Or do you feel that it's more, hey, remember that thing that we did? What if we made that their theme? Which do you think happens more often?
I think more often than not, it's the latter. And I would bet money in the case of the Lord of the Rings and in the case of the Matrix that's what happened. Because they didn't even know there were going to be more movies. Whereas Lord of the Rings, Howard Shore got that job because he showed up to the set in New Zealand with an annotated copy of the book, and he knew everything about the stories and was basically like, you would be stupid to not hire me.
Wow.
And because they had already made offers to at least James Horner, and they'd been turned down. And because the scale of the job was so large, it was like, you don't get to do anything for the next 3 years. And other composers, the John Williams, James Horner, they couldn't just say no to the Spielbergs of their life for that long. And so Howard Shore was in a unique situation that he was really well known, but didn't have quite that gravy train. Although he did manage to sneak one David Cronenberg movie in the middle of the Lord of the Rings trilogy called Spider, which always impressed me. But he was basically willing.
The one with Ralph Fiennes?
Yep. Yeah, he did that between 2 of the Lord of the Rings scores.
Have you ever seen that, Alanah?
I've not.
It is his most uncomfortable movie. He smokes the entire movie. It's fucking. That was David Cronenberg.
Yeah, all of his movies are uncomfortable, but anyway, yeah. So Howard Shore, he was clearly like deeply a nerd for the material, writing music in Elvish and all this kinds of stuff. And so it was no surprise that they used that theme. It's when Boromir, to answer your question, it's when Boromir is talking about his father and like holding the line back at Minas Tirith during the Fellowship of the Council of Elrond scene around the ring.
That makes sense.
Sort of right before the one does not simply walk into Mordor.
My guess would have been
moment.
it was him and Aragorn talking at night in Rivendell, because it's just the two of them, of men. But that makes sense.
It is nearly that scene, but it is during Boromir's sort of speech. You hear the solo French horn do that melody, and then you don't really hear it again until the third film. And I remember that was so. I suspect it's not the case in The Matrix. Him featuring that little tune, he probably just wrote something that felt like this is capturing, that relationship. Because obviously, she has that whole monologue to him when the Sentinels are ripping apart the ship. And, Neo has to rise and overcome having just been shot to death at the end of the first movie. There's justification for this melody. I have to go back and remember the exact moment where it appears. It's possible that I'm got my wires crossed, but I remember being like, that's the theme. That's like the little hint of the little tune.
Do you think I could Google that? Is that Googleable?
I think you could Google
How would I look that up?
If you set your mind to it, you can do it.
When? I have when.
When
Matrix.
I'm going to try the Bithell style approach to solving this.
Look behind. How are you, everybody?
It makes
Doing
it sound like the Matrix Resurrections actually has a new Neo and Trinity theme, which is interesting. In any case, most of the reviews here do seem to largely be pretty positive. I just know some people hated it, but I unfortunately don't know why. I'm always okay with people disliking things. They did give me low expectations, but
it's the full conductor score to all the music of the whole film. So
we don't even need Mike anymore.
We've talked about this before. I just don't care what people think.
No, it's fine.
I care like what Austin thinks. I care what you think as far as like, oh my gosh, you should see this because of relationship with you. But anybody else that comes on and says, I'm going to tell you why you shouldn't watch this movie.
No, you can't do that. You can't be telling other people how to feel. Get that out of here. You can't do any of that.
Tell that to that's the whole premise of Twitter and Reddit right now. Let me tell you how you should feel.
It is true. One of my favorites is sometimes people I got it on sort of did a review of the Resident Evil movie, and people were like, your opinion sucks. Here's what I think and why it's correct. And I was like, they would start with, this is just your opinion. And then they'd list their opinion as though it was fact. And I would just reply with, this is just your opinion. I don't understand why we need to, can we not just disagree? That's okay. But yeah, I'm glad you liked it, Troy, because I was concerned that you would be one of the people who were in the camp who hated it because just a lot of people did.
And I think that there's a lot of it where, like you did with Spider-Man, you go, okay, this is what it is. It doesn't need to be anything for me. Can I just accept it for what it is? Yeah. And that movie didn't deliver. What is that? It's not a pizza. It wasn't here because you specifically ordered specific ingredients. I walked in and I was like, didn't like it, didn't care for it. And I can kind of point out some things that I feel objectively were this, but I didn't, it's not up to my prescription. And sometimes it's not to people's taste, and that's fine.
It sure is.
And that goes across the board for everything.
I also got some more context on Lily Wachowski not being part of it.
Ooh,
so it's part that she said, I got out of my transition in 2016 and was just completely exhausted because we had made Cloud Atlas and Jupiter Ascending and the first season of Sense8 back to back to back. We were posting one and prepping the other one at the exact same time, which is nuts. That's super impressive. So you're talking about 3 100
posting and
plus,
prepping?
Yeah. 3 100 plus days of shooting for each project. And so coming out and just being completely exhausted, my world was like falling apart to some extent. So I needed time away from the industry. I needed to reconnect with myself as an artist, and I did that by going back to school and painting and stuff. And then the part that I had heard is she goes on to say, Alanah had come up with this idea for another Matrix movie, and we had this talk, and it was actually, we started talking about it in between our dad and our mom dying, which was 5 weeks apart. There was something about the idea of going backward and being a part of something that I had done before that was expressly unappealing. I didn't want to have gone through my transition and gone through this massive upheaval in my life, the sense of loss from my mom and dad, to want to go back to something I had done before and sort of walk over old paths that I had walked in. Felt emotionally unfulfilling and really the opposite. Like I was going back to live in these old shoes in a way. I didn't want to do that. And I
Damn.
believe Lana said that she felt the opposite, that she felt like going back would be comforting to her. So I respect it.
Not only do I respect that, I really commend both of them for being able to be so forthcoming and aware. You know what I mean? I feel,
And
you've
also,
heard
a lot
about
of people assume that there was drama. And it's like, no, two people can just not do something together and it doesn't have to be dramatic.
Sure, right? Like we automatically inextricably tie them to
They must have
each
gotten a
other.
fight. Nope.
I feel like
I can forgive that though to a degree if everything was branded
Sure.
as the Wachowskis for ages.
Yeah.
You know, like that. It was definitely a team effort for up until now. I guess. I think.
it's
Yeah,
like the
yeah,
Coen
you're right,
brothers,
you're right.
You
It is
expect
logical.
Coen brothers to do something together, but the thing that I is to me especially revealing is that you've heard about post-production blues, and there's something about posting. Being in post and prepping at the same time, people are like, oh my gosh, it's such a hard thing to do. I understand the appeal because what you do, it's like it's drinking to avoid the hangover. And sometimes what you need to do is you need to finish post, wrap, and sit in silence and not have anything else to do to grieve the thing that you just made. You
Yeah.
just It grew up and it left home. It's like if people grew up and their kids grew up and they left and went up to college and then they immediately adopted a kid. You're like, hold on a second. Appreciate this time that you have. And I think that one of the reasons why she may have been even more exhausted is because there were now two things that she didn't properly grieve the thing that she just
Three
finished.
of them, I think. It's
Three. That's
Cloud Atlas, Jupiter Ascending, and Sense8.
But I think she said she was posting while they were prepping Sense8,
Yeah, you're
right?
right, yeah.
So it's you can rap on something and be like, man, it sucks. I mean, I've talked to so many filmmakers, directors, game developers, whatever, that a lot of them said they hate shipping a game because it's just they know that it's no longer in their hands, and there's such there's a mourning to it that happens. But it's a very healthy thing because clearly those people go on to make more things. If they don't, then maybe it's something they should have done in the first place.
Working in games media was always a little bit like that after E3 because you spend half of your year preparing tirelessly for E3. And then weirdly, that got better because Comic-Con started ramping up immediately afterwards.
Right.
So you'd have like a week and then you're back into it. I had
Right.
someone message me this week who was like, hey, assuming Ragnarok is coming out this year, enjoy Crunch, you're gonna love it. And that is not to suggest that I've worked any Crunch, I have not. But I was like, was that a sarcastic comment? And they were like, no. They were like, no, I fully mean that. It's like one of the best things I've ever done. And I was like, wow, I've never heard anybody admit that before. I guess because it can be problematic and unhealthy in some ways. But I'm like, I've enjoyed working Crunch at other jobs for sure, where it feels like everybody is working together on something. And I totally don't want to romanticize it. But it was just very interesting to have somebody who works in game dev and has for, I think it's like almost 20 years, message me and be like, you're going to love it. It's like, wow, no one ever says that.
I don't feel that anyone who is unhealthy should, who has potential heart risk and has not trained, should go out and run a marathon. It is inadvisable for anybody to go and willingly volunteer to run any length, 10K, 15K, 20K, to do an incredible, distance of running if you've never trained for it. And if you've not made sure that medically you are sound. That being said, being in a position where I did do that, I did a half marathon, 13.1. That's all I need to do. Don't need to do the 26.2.
That's so brutal.
But I know people that have done 50. And there is a great sense of accomplishment where you look back and you said, I just ran 13 miles.
It's also, that's fairly bad for your body. Like marathons, what is his relation to me? I guess is my cousin's husband.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what that relationship is. He does multiple every year, multiple marathons, and is always like, afterwards, I can't do it anymore because running a marathon is so bad for your body. It's like doing one, you have to space out the next one. People can do them multiple times, but they're so bad for your body. That said, I will continue to do 5 every year. And I didn't know that even a marathon is literally bad for you physically. It's bad for your joints. It can be bad for you in a whole bunch of ways. But he's like, but I love doing it. I love training for them. I love getting them done. But you have to recover afterwards. Otherwise, you will injure yourself.
I think that it can be damaging if you are not properly trained. And I think that anything you obsess over can always have damage. any working out is damaging to your body.
True.
Like if you don't want to damage your body, don't pick up anything that is heavier than what you can easily do, because that is damaging your body. That's the definition of what working out is. What my trainer, I love what he said.
I don't think that is accurate.
Hold on, let me explain. My trainer said.
I think you shouldn't. I think we should just live in ignorance of your perspective.
The one thing that I said that my trainer says that I love so much is like you don't get strong in the gym. This is where we destroy your body. You get strong as you sleep. You get strong as you rest. So it has nothing to do with I can do 2 a days and party at night. It's like that's not working out. It must be coupled with proper diet and rest and hydration. So
I think it's just a semantics thing, though. I think,
but it's a very important distinction. There's a difference between damaging your body. I understand what you're saying, but there's things that I could not do that would be damaging, that were not, my body can't do that, as opposed to lack of strength and pointing out. And this goes across the board. This has nothing to do with just like, hey, I'm working out, bro, and in the gym and protein, whatever. This is talking about how do I stay healthy and mobile for the rest of my life. And I don't believe in that there's science that shows it has nothing to do with just you have a bad back now. It's like, no, you have lack of strength and you need to do that. But that takes damaging your body. It takes tearing muscles so that they can be rebuilt and forming new mind to muscle connections. So that can feel damaging, but it also does not mean that you're doing permanent damage.
I think there's a difference between stimulating the muscle and therefore causing it to, grow, for lack of a better word, to gain strength and to develop.
That's semantics, though. Stimulating and tearing. There's a difference.
No, but tearing and damaging means that it is undergoing some kind of physical trauma.
It is. That's what weightlifting is. It's physical
That's what
trauma.
weightlifting is. You perform micro tears.
I think I take issue with the word damaging, but it is tearing.
Okay.
I only take issue with the word damaging, which is semantics, because we read that as injury. You're not injuring your muscles, but you are tearing them.
Correct. Yeah, I would look at and say there's a difference between.
Maybe I have a blind spot in my knowledge here, but
you don't know a shit ton
muscle?
about. That is literally what weightlifting is. Yeah, you have to tear them so they rebuild. I'm shocked Austin Wintry is not the weightlifting expert on the podcast.
Bro, do you live well?
I do lift.
Eccentric movement, especially eccentric movement. That's where most of the micro tears happen. You've got fast twitch and slow twitch muscles. And when you do those micro tears, your body goes, we need to build, which is why you have to increase your intake of protein so that your body can produce more.
I mean, that all makes sense.
BCAAs are great muscles.
I'm definitely willing to acknowledge that I could be wrong here. It certainly feels intuitively wrong that you are damaging it, but I certainly would agree that that lifting is not where you build the strength. It's sort of like the reaction by your body to that process, which is why proper muscle building is a really long-term
we just never thought that we'd get into this on this podcast.
I was setting this up as saying getting into crunch, right?
Yeah.
If you are in a situation, I'm not going to get into crunch culture at all because there's just no way I can contribute to that conversation effectively. But I can say don't sign up to do a marathon if you're not trained. And don't expect a marathon to be easy. It is hard. So if somebody go in and is like, hey, it's going to suck and you're going to get on the other side of this, you're going to feel very great. That's awesome. But there's the difference, and I wish Mike was here for this conversation because he could speak to this.
Well, I know what Mike would say. He would say,
don't run.
Producers prevent crunch. Don't make your team crunch. Make sure that you plan accordingly so people don't have to do that, and there is a world where you cannot.
I agree, and I think there's a predetermined amount. I knew how long I was running. It wasn't just like you're just going to continue to run for forever.
That's true.
And no one told me how fast I had to run. I could take as little or as long as I wanted.
Yeah.
But the distance was predetermined. So I guess that's what I'm saying. But I understand, like doing something hard. Yeah, man. There's a good tired at the end of the day. It's like you did something.
But especially as a group, like when you do something collectively and like. IGN's E3 teams were massive and it was really hard and everyone was working incredibly hard. Game dev's a whole other thing though. Like working with hundreds of people who are just so good at what they do will never stop feeling cool to me. Hopefully. Like I'm still at a point where somebody sends an email and if I don't know what a term means, I'll just ask them.
Fuck yeah, dude.
I'll just reply and be like, what does this mean? And every single time that I have done that, I've gotten a detailed response from somebody who's clearly excited to tell me information about this one thing only they know. And I think it's just so fucking awesome that I'm like, I just
Everybody
have
wants
access
to be a teacher.
to you being super informed and passionate. And they're like somebody recently sent a bunch of GIFs to explain. They were like, well, this means this, and here's how it looks in development. It's fucking, like, I would pay for this. It's so cool. And like every game studio is just full of people who are so specifically informed and enthusiastic about what they do. And it's awesome. It's
like that great, it's like School of Hard Knocks. I hate to use such a cliche term, but it's so true. It's like being on a job and like, now it counts. It's not just an academic experiment, but like you're being paid to do this. I've never met someone, even especially the most arrogant, who didn't love being a teacher and go, can you show me how to do that? They love it. It's great. So I'm a little short on time, but I did, and kind of in speaking with this, I wanted to share something with you guys because I've talked about it before.
Wait,
and
I'll just say I did
please.
find it. I did find it at the very end.
Good.
It is the moment that when Neo is unconscious in the chair, and the moment that Trinity
You have to be the one.
Kisses him. Well, there's a whole build up. Yes, the Oracle told me, blah, 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 blah. And then the actual moment she kisses him, you'll see violas and horns together. It's super underdeveloped. Yeah.
Did you get your nails done?
Yeah, God. But that right there in G minor going. That's the first glimpse of that. I knew I wasn't crazy,
cool.
but it's not. It's really undercooked compared to where he takes it. So anyway, I'm glad I found it because I've been sitting here reading through the whole last cue of the film and being like, I swear I'm not crazy.
I think
Anyway.
that Hans Zimmer with Batman Begins
Who?
intentionally did it's like the Batman theme that is in those movies is incomplete in Begins, so it's like it intentionally doesn't finish. So
There's a whole YouTube video. Yeah, you can.
More.
Yeah, I've heard sort of there's conflicting tales there.
That's not direct from him.
Well, no, I've just heard him say two different things that feel like they don't quite align. That's like one. They didn't feel like both could be true.
Interesting.
But what were you about to say, Troy?
Yes.
Since we're about to be out of time here.
I was just going to say,
you off.
No, it's all good. In the spirit of talking about doing the hard thing and being faced with adversity, I think I've shared with you guys before. Like I had one specific event where I was scuba diving and I had a panic attack underwater, like 85 feet. And that has kind of like stay with me. And there's a great podcast, Andrew Huberman, called the Huberman Lab, as a professor from Stanford, and he talks about the neurology behind a lot of emotional, especially trauma and fear. And so I've really been kind of digging into that and wanting to overcome it. And one of the things they consistently talk about is exposure therapy. So I've been having it's oddly we talk about, doing damage to your body, whatever, but I've been having these perpetual back problems. And so Sunday, doing absolutely nothing and just bent over to pick up a towel, my back, quote, went out. And I've been dealing with that ever since and trying to do everything that I can and some of the tools that I've learned since then to kind of help. But it finally led to the point I was like, all right, I'm going to see if there's anything else that is going on that I don't know about. And knowledge is power. Information is key. And so I went and scheduled an MRI. Now, if you don't know what an MRI is, magnetic resonance imaging, they put you into basically a space tube and magnets move around your body and takes a picture. That, for me, for someone who can now say that I struggle with claustrophobia, it's like the worst scenario for me. And so I walked in and I said, hey, I just need to know, I've done one of these before. How long are we talking about? Like 15 minutes? She was like, yeah, 15 minutes. I was like, okay, great. She goes, twice. I went, She goes, well, if you want to take a break, we can take a break. She goes, but you're going to come back in. You'll do these 2 rounds of 15 minutes. I was like, okay, 15 minutes does not seem like that long unless you are surrounded with a plastic tube 2 inches from your face. And I said, do you have the panic button? She goes, yeah. Do you have claustrophobia? I was like, a little bit. She goes, yeah, you'll have this. She was like, would you like mirror glasses? I went, that sounds terrible. And she said, these mirror glasses that instead of looking up and all you can see is just this, dome of plastic that's surrounding you, you can actually look and you'll see
the room.
You can see me and see the room. And I was like, fuck yeah. She goes, do you want headphones? I was like, yes. I was hoping I could have some. I was like, could you please put on, especially Chopin, it's really great. She's like, absolutely. So she found some classical music for me, put me in, and in I went. And I ended up counting down 15 times, 60 to 0, and just kind of keeping that pace. And boy, my mind did everything that it could to put me back into the situation of that fear and that trauma. And it was really, really hard. I was sweating. I could feel my heart pounding. I had the panic button in my hand the entire time. And then next thing I know, she's pulling me out. She's like, "You did it. It's round one. Do you want to do it again?" And I had the opportunity to pull out and go, "No, I'm going to cash out now." And I said, "Yeah, let's do it." And the second round was far, far easier. So I just want to encourage you that there's, if anybody has any kind of like fear or trauma or something that they're dealing with, always do it. The reason why I could do that was because I was under the direct supervision of a medical professional. And they knew what that machine was. They knew what my situation going in was. There was a lot of background information that they had going in. So everybody felt safe moving into that. It was just going to be hard. So don't ever do something like getting therapy, even with a friend. Talking with a friend is incredibly helpful. But if you've experienced any kind of fear or trauma or anything, and you feel that you need help with that, I just want to encourage you, do the hard thing. And find a safe place and a safe way for you to do that. But there's nothing wrong with ever just being exposed to that same kind of fear from a safe distance to help you kind of overcome that, because it is possible. The beauty of our brains is that the very thing that triggers our fear is it's the double-edged sword. The same thing is how we can fix that fear. So anyway, just want to.
So I guess the headline is Troy suggests nonstop crunch.
That's where I can't wait for the comments.
Listen, I strongly agree, but also my number one fear is spiders.
Oh, I want to get into that with you. I'm going to send you the link to this podcast. There is
To this podcast?
something to this podcast. I'm
Just
going to
listen
send
to it back.
The Huberman Lab. Check it out. Talk about fear and trauma, because he talks specifically about spiders. It's fantastic.
I can't. I tried exposure therapy, and it didn't help. Made it worse.
There's also something inherent to all creatures on the planet that have a predisposition against spiders.
I've heard that
Really?
also. Yeah.
There's just something about it. Everyone's
It's
like,
because
fuck 8
they've been
legs.
around. Spiders have like 400 million years of evolutionary history. They predated the dinosaurs. They've survived multiple mass extinctions.
They're
like
perfect
one of the
predator.
most successful life forms in the
even
history
this,
of humanity.
my whole body is covered in chills. Just talking about it. And I have this thing where whenever they're present and in my brain, I then feel like spiders are crawling all over me. So I will like be hitting myself for hours, just be like, ugh. I also am very scared of crabs, and I think it's because they are spider-like.
Yeah, totally.
I always get people be like,
Crabs
they're not
are the
going to hurt
spiders
you.
of the sea.
I'm not scared of them hurting me. I'm not scared of being hurt. I'm scared of a scuttery thing that disappears in my fucking house. Like,
I would eat a crab. I would not eat a spider.
I can't eat either.
I gotta run.
We've left me in a dark place here, but
Do
that's
it.
fine.
Yeah, Troy condones crunch.
No, he doesn't.
Alanah,
No, he doesn't.
Mr. Anderson.
Troy, have you seen Spider-Man?
No, I'll see it.
Do it.
I'll watch
Do
it.
it. I finished Arcane, Austin. Also, I thought
finished
I thought
that
the first
too.
episode of Boba Fett was really bad. Okay, bye, everyone.
Wait, don't you dare. Don't you dare.
I did.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I thought it was really bad.
We're gonna get letters.
He hung up.
Fucking hell.
I didn't even introduce the show. Troy, can you wait with me while I intro the show? Hi, everyone. This is Play, Watch, Listen. Troy may have stopped recording. Austin's already gone. Well, you know the show. Mike's not here. Okay, bye.